Random fact from history. During the medieval era, in both Europe and across the world, if anybody stumbled upon a megalodon tooth, they had no idea of knowing that it was the fossilized remains of a giant shark that existed millions of years ago. And the main conclusion that they came up with was that it was actually the petrified tongue tip of a dragon. Not only did these megalodon teeth fuel the belief that dragons were real, but they encouraged many stories in European folklore and other folklore around the world about people finding dragons and destroying them and things of that nature. Essentially, the megalodon is why we have dragon mythology. Random fact from history. So everybody knows the story of Balto, right? The dog whose team it was that delivered the antitoxin to diphtheria to Nome, Alaska in 1925. Well, it was actually over 20 dog teams to make the 674-mile journey to Nome, Alaska to deliver that antitoxin in the first place. However, there was one dog sled team that managed to travel 261 miles of that journey, and that team was led by a 12-year-old champion racing husky named Togo. And Togo had it even more difficult, not only because of the distance they were traveling, but because they were going through a blizzard that his musher couldn't see the trail in front of them. But he trusted his dog, and Togo managed to lead all of them safely through that storm to their checkpoint. And because of that, people today still credit Togo as being the true hero of Nome, Alaska. Random fact from history. So everybody knows the nursery rhyme Baa Baa Black Sheep, right? Baa Baa Black Sheep, have you any wool? Yes sir, 3 bags full. 1 for the master, 1 for the dame, and 1 for the little boy who lives down the lane. But what a bunch of people don't know is that the rhyme originally ended with, and none for the little boy who cries down the lane. This is because black sheep wool could not be dyed, so it was considered bad luck to receive a bag of black sheep wool. The rhyme itself is also written about the unfair splitting of taxes, and the little boy who cries down the lane is the farmer's hand, who never got a share of the taxes. So when the black sheep says 3 bags full, and none for the little boy who cries down the lane, is because the little boy does not deserve a bag of bad luck. Random fact from history. In the year 1876, a plot to steal the body of Abraham Lincoln was foiled. However, the fear that this could happen again caused for the formation of the Lincoln Guard of Honor in the year 1880. One of the founding members was John Carroll Power, who was the tomb's custodian, and he took an extra step in making sure that Lincoln's body was protected. What he did was he took Lincoln's body and he moved it down into the cellar or the basement of the tomb, and that's where he covered it with unused construction material and wood and some other debris, and just kind of left it there for the next 14 years. Random fact from history. Just as the megalodon's teeth were mistaken for the tongue tips of dragons, the entire body of the basking shark was once mistaken for confirmation of the sea serpent, or the dragon of the sea, if you will. This actually comes about for roughly 2 main reasons. One being that basking sharks are the 2nd largest species of shark on the planet. Their average length is 22 to 29 feet, but they can get up to 40 feet. And second, they don't tend to travel alone, and when they do travel in groups together, they go in a single file line. And obviously, to early explorers, this would look like a giant serpent swimming about in the water, and therefore that's their confirmation that sea monsters like the sea serpent exist. Random fact from history. So everybody knows Paul Revere from the American Revolution, right? The guy who said the British are coming. First of all, he wasn't the only one who said that. But what we're here for today is the fact that he took credit for the engraving of the Boston Massacre, this little newspaper clipping right here, this artwork on it. He took credit for that away from the actual engraver, Henry Pollum, who was in his early 20s at the time that he created this scene. But barely anybody remembers him because Paul Revere decided, no, I want to take credit for this. I made this. It's mine. Random fact from history. The Mesopotamian poem, the Epic of Gilgamesh, is believed to be the oldest written story in history. It is also believed that Gilgamesh was a real ancient king of Uruk, and that he is credited for building the great walls of Uruk. These inscriptions that credit him for building the walls are also said to be the tablets that would later inspire what we now know as the Epic of Gilgamesh. Random fact from history. Ancient Egyptian medical tools dating back to around 1200 BC indicate the practice of cataract surgery. This specific kind of procedure we now know as needling. What this procedure did was the needle itself would go in and it would cut at your cornea, and it would push your opaque lens back behind your iris, and it would expose your pupil. So you could see. You would not be able to focus your vision. It would always be a little blurry, but you could see enough where you could do your work. You could make out who was in front of you. And this was such a common procedure done on both the pharaohs and civilians alike, again, so everybody could do their job. Random fact from history. During the Revolutionary War, George Washington knew that the biggest threat to his troops, other than the redcoats, was actually the disease known as smallpox. During this time era, there was a large smallpox outbreak in areas such as Philadelphia, and there was a huge risk of the troops contracting smallpox. In order to prevent this from happening, George Washington ordered that his troops would be inoculated with the smallpox vaccine to help protect them from this disease while they were fighting the British, and by doing so, it is very likely that this is one of the many key factors that helped us win the Revolutionary War. Random fact from history. While there were many Native American tribes that traveled along the Trail of Tears, there are 5 specific ones that we know best. The Cherokee, the Creek, the Chickasaw, the Choctaw, and the Seminoles. These 5 tribes are known as the Civilized Tribes. The reason being is because after the American Revolution was won, the Founding Fathers had a bit of an agreement with these tribes that if they sort of conformed to the colonial way of living, they could remain on the land that they had known their entire existence. And thus, they conformed, they were allowed to remain on their lands until Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act of 1830 went against this, and essentially all of their efforts were done in vain.